Thanks to everyone who's joining us today for this session. Thank you to my colleagues, Leslie and Freeman. Thank you for joining us from Ghana. Today, we'll be having a conversation with you in this discussion entitled Global Access to Education, Knowledge is a Human Right. If you've had the opportunity to see the trailer for the movie that we just showed to all who are here in person, it's for our upcoming short film called I Promise You. I Promise You is a love letter that we all wanted to share to those who care deeply about people all around the world. It is a story told from the voices of those that we support. It tells stories of children, families, and communities who strive for freedom of knowledge. We will premiere I Promise You on National Pencil Day, which is on March 30th. And if you'd like to see the entire film, please register on our website, which is pencilsofpromise.org. So thanks for that. So today, I'm really happy to be in a community with a group of you who are all committed to providing the highest quality education and opportunities to people everywhere. I know that we all share the value that access to knowledge allows each of us to achieve our fullest potential. During this session, we'll share with you the vision of Pencils of Promise and our goal to remove the barriers to education for children everywhere. POP's aim is to rewrite the story that was pre-written for some of our world's most overlooked people and to help them in their efforts to achieve all of the opportunities that are before them, because we believe that achieving opportunities is our basic human right. For me, I recently joined the Pencils of Promise family community. We have programs and offices in Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos. And people often ask me, I've had a pretty long career working for progressive issues. I've worked with several issues ranging from social justice, to environmental issues, to health equality. And people ask me, how did I land at Pencils of Promise? And I always say the same thing. For me, it's a linear throughway. It is all equity work. It is all the work of freedom. And I'm a freedom fighter. And it brings me such joy and gratitude to be able to do this work every single day. I believe that every person was born equal and free. I believe that freedom includes freedom of access, freedom of movement, and freedom of knowledge. I also know that there are barriers to this freedom and for equality for many people, and that our world's history of oppression and exploitation of people still plays out today all over the world, and it limits humanity's ability to thrive. I'm proud of Pencils of Promise and all of our collective efforts to help remove these barriers for children, families, and communities everywhere. For those who don't know, Pencils of Promise, or POP as we call it, was started in 2009 by our founder, Adam Braun, who through his travels around the world saw the inequity firsthand. In an effort to honor the sacrifices made by his own family, as they had opportunities in the United States, he understood his responsibility to help and support others. He and all of us know that this begins at the primary school level, a time and a place where dreams are born. He had a birthday, and through his birthday party, he raised money to start a school in Laos. 13 years later, POP has built an ecosystem of national leaders, teachers, students, families, community leaders. We've built over 500 schools, and we've packed over 200,000 students. Today, we're going to tell you what we've learned along the way. You're going to hear from our COO, who will talk to you about globally why we choose the programs and activities that we do. You'll hear from our country director in Ghana, who will tell you about the impact of education, specifically in Ghana, and the things that he's leading and the activities that he is leading, to give you a very specific insight as to the ecosystem that we've built and how we transform not just a child and a community, but the world. POP support centers on some key tenets to create healthy, self-engaging environments for learning. We build safe, sound infrastructure. We provide trained and highly effective teachers. We provide high-quality, hygienic education and resources like clean water and menstrual health programming. So I'd like you all to be introduced once again to my colleague, Leslie. Leslie has been with POP for over a decade. She's served in various programmatic roles. She's spent extensive time in all of our POP countries, and she's lived in Laos. So Leslie, thank you for joining us today.
And hi, Freeman. It's nice to meet you.
Please talk to the group. If you would, talk to everyone through the lens of your journey with Pencils of Promise, POP, as we call it once again. Please talk to us about some of the things that you've learned, some of the activities that we choose to do globally, and how that impacts our global community.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Pencils of Promise was started, we took a look at the global landscape of education. What is the need and what is happening, and where can we support? And so at the beginning of this, I myself was physically in Laos, working with a team of folks who are Lao and doing all this work. And what we started to see and hear from community leaders, teachers, and students was a deep desire and need for, first and foremost, infrastructure. Those of you sitting here and listening, if you could drop your memory of your first grade classroom, my guess is that it probably has 4 walls and a roof and a bathroom and maybe even running water and books, things that your kids probably have when they go to school that my daughter will have. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about a lack of infrastructure in a lot of these places globally. We're saying under a tree. We're saying, at best under a tree. So we're talking about when it rains, you don't go to school. When it's too cold, you're not able to go to school. All of these types of external barriers. So very early on at Pencils of Promise, we wanted to meet that need. We were like, that is somewhere that we can help. And so by engaging communities and starting to build that, that's what really started our foundation. To then also say, we want to go beyond the 4 walls. A school is the magic that happens inside of your classroom. It's the passion that your teacher brings, the knowledge that your teacher brings. It's the joy that you have when you walk into the classroom, the knowledge, the tools, all of those types of things. So now we've spent the last decade plus really focusing on, as you said, Kailee, we have 200,000 students that we've impacted. What does that impact? What does that actually look like? What is the education you're getting inside of the classroom, and really making sure we take that very seriously.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm proudest of when I think about Pencils of Promise is the emphasis that we take on really addressing global development and the intersection of global development and education in a way that centers the needs of those that we support. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes you see in development, development agents coming into communities and thinking that they understand what the solutions are, mm-hmm. And imparting those solutions without really engaging the community in the way that the community needs to be engaged, mm-hmm. and without really underscoring what success looks like as it is seen, translated, and needed, mm-hmm. through those who it impacts the most. I know that Pencils of Promise really finds a sweet spot there, which is why, as you said, our classrooms are not empty, mm-hmm. And our communities are fully engaged in the support that POP provides. Can you talk a little bit more about that journey and that emphasis that we place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, first and foremost, you have someone like Freeman here, who is the real leader in our organization, right? We have a lot of leaders, and all of our work in Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos is led by folks that are from Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos. We're talking about, we have leaders that are deeply ingrained in country, culture, customs, all of these things that I could never do and should never do. And that, I'd like to think, doesn't set us apart a lot, but I think it does. That is quite different than how a lot of international organizations operate. And we believe in that very deeply. I believe that for example, in this room, me and Freeman, I'm here to help clear the pathway for something that Freeman wants to do. That's how I see my job and the job of our colleagues in the office in the US. How can we make sure you have the tools and resources to help create impactful, massive change in communities across Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos? I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. I don't know what you need to do, nor should I tell you. So I think that having this deep emphasis on national staff, local knowledge, and being ready, willing, and open to whatever we hear is the need, and not walking in saying, you need a school, right? Isn't that what you need? Right. Rather saying, just making space. You speak. You talk first.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to is what oftentimes we see missing in development, which is empowerment.
Yeah.
Oftentimes development can breed dependency. And when we think about global work, oftentimes we see global work does not cultivate empowerment, does not allow or does not facilitate those who need support to be able to achieve their own goals and to define what success looks like. And so, as you said, at Pencils of Promise, the vast majority of our staff are nationals, because who else, who better to be able to define what success looks like? Who better to be able to create the needs assessment and to define how we progress, how we move forward, how we adapt, how we innovate than those who are impacted most? And as you said, it would be very valuable if all in development, I've worked in development for quite some time, and we talk often about the issues and challenges in the development space. And I think that is a key tenet of how to create a successful program, a sustainable program. So in addition to that, I want to talk a little bit about women and girls. Another thing that I'm extremely proud of at Pencils of Promise is our emphasis on women and girls. We see in many places in the world that girls and women are underrepresented as they matriculate. And we hear a lot of talking about how important women and girls are to this world. Economists tell us all the time about the importance of women and girls in this world and why educating them is so critical. And so I know that at Pencils of Promise, of course I know this, that we have particular emphasis on our women and girls. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's important?
First of all, I just love how you say that. Like, we know this. Invest in women. We know it. This is a fact that we know. We know it across the world. Invest in women and girls, and you'll see the returns. And so that's exactly what we're doing. When you talk about the education landscape globally and the disparity between boys and girls, where you really see that start to happen in big numbers is at the secondary school level. Pencils of Promise made the distinct choice when we started to work in pre-primary and primary school. So really believing that we want to start kind of from the bottom up and really impact kids there. That does not mean that we don't have a large role to play in this later on issue. So how that plays out for us is in a few ways. A big one is when you get to secondary school, so let's say that you are a young girl getting ready to go into secondary school, there is going to be a multitude of external factors that are going to pressure you to not go. There's going to be a lot of reasons, and we know what a lot of them are, right? There's caring for your family, there's marriage, there's pregnancy, there's jobs, there's all of these things, safety, cultural issues. If you have been going to school, however, since preschool through 5th grade, you've been learning, you've been loving it, you've been safe, you've been cared for, and you've been nurtured, you and your family are going to be a lot more likely to want to send you to school. So that's where we're taking this very seriously at the primary level, because we still believe that, like, we want to see gender parity in our classrooms. We want that 5th, 6th, that 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old girl to be able to say, I want to go to school. School is a great place where I am safe, I am loved, I am learning. And so that's really where we're, back to the beginning of investing inside the classroom, what that looks like. And then there's also some very specific things that I think Freeman will probably speak to a bit more in depth, or can, around particularly menstrual hygiene management. So the other factors that we know, I was talking about these external factors, right? The other factors that we know stop girls from going to school, where all of a sudden you're just not going to school for 1 week every month. How quickly you fall behind and how quickly you stop going. So something that we're doing at the primary level is investing in boys and girls and parents and teachers and community members to destigmatize and normalize menstruation. So girls are able to make their own pads, be ready for attending school while they're on their period, have it normalized, have it something that's talked about in the classroom and understood, so that again, when you get to secondary school and there's all these outside forces, that's not one of them for you.
Right. So as we think about all of the opportunities or all of the barriers that POP addresses, and I'll summarize those just broadly, because I do want to talk about how COVID has impacted that in our world, as it has all over the world. And then as we then start to speak with Freeman a little bit about how this shows up specifically in Ghana, just to summarize, because it is so much, as Leslie communicated, when you're a child in a country that has been traditionally overlooked, Oftentimes, you don't have what you need in order to access basic primary education, which prevents you from unlocking your own talents, which limits your opportunities and your choices in life. And what is so important about Pencils of Promise and other organizations that intervene is that we facilitate children, and we remove the barriers to children to fulfill their dreams and to self-actualize. So as Leslie said, this shows up in a few ways. Mainly it shows up in infrastructure, as Leslie pointed out. Students often don't have a building to access learning. They're learning outdoors, they're learning in unsafe conditions. Oftentimes, children also don't have access to clean water. They live in environments where water is, they live in rural environments, and clean water isn't always accessible. And the water that they drink is also water where they wash, and their parents wash clothes and dishes, and it can make them sick and vulnerable to very easily preventable diseases. And they show up at school sick and not feeling well, and as a result of that, they miss school, which further leaves them behind, things that we often take for granted. There are also basic hygienic services that students don't receive. Oftentimes, as Leslie was just talking about, our women and girls miss school, sometimes for weeks at a time, weeks out of the month. Imagine the cumulative impact of missing a week of school out of every single month because they have started their period, something as simple as starting their period. So as a result of that, girls don't continue to matriculate. And then finally, we want to make sure that when students are in classroom, even if they have clean water and all of those things, that they are able to show up in the classroom, that their teachers, the teachers themselves, who are also a part of these barriers, who are also a part of being in an environment that is overlooked. Teachers aren't trained in the same way as they would be trained in Western communities. So they are part of that unfortunate cycle. So our students aren't receiving the highest level of competencies and socio-emotional learning that many of our students receive in the Western world, in the United States. And so Pencils of Promise ensures that our teachers are trained. We devise very specific trainings for teachers that is responsive to the needs in those particular communities. And so this happens in Guatemala, in Laos, and in Ghana. And so first, Leslie, can you talk a bit about how COVID has impacted some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's been devastating, in short. I think as we've seen, particularly vulnerable communities are made more vulnerable. Historically, overlooked communities and overlooked populations are just kind of pulling at all the seams here. And something that's been really kind of a through line that's been very important to me at Pencils of Promise and that really came through during COVID is your last point, the teacher. I was a teacher prior to starting this work, so I'm deeply invested in anything that we do, any intervention that we have. First and foremost, we should be saying to a teacher, is this going to make a teacher's life easier? Or did I accidentally just make your life harder? Did I step in and say, I want you to do this new curriculum on top of all the other that you're already doing? So, we're thinking about the teacher. And then when COVID hit, I think that was, and we've heard this discussion domestically too, teachers, believe it or not, which a lot of you are also humans, are also people with deep needs, are also people that are suffering and coming out of deep trauma, and what does this look like? So that was something that we really took into account at the very beginning when everyone was dealing with this, this pivot, what are we gonna do? And what we wanted to do, we wanted to be an organization that continued to show up. We could have easily said, you know what, we work in schools and schools are closed, so we'll see you when they open back up.
Right.
But instead we said, okay, we've got these teachers out there that we used to communicate with all the time. We used to be a support system, peers, mentors, friends, colleagues with. How are they coping? So we did simple things like starting a text platform where we could literally just send out messages that were like, hey, here's a resource if you need it, to something unrelated to POP, right? We're sending out, here's a food insecurity resource if you might need it. Hi, how are you? Like these simple things to still, because again, we're all humans, and in this moment of needing deep human connection, we were wanting to make sure that in looking out for students, we were also thinking about teachers. So then we, of course, made all these other pivots to think about the students and how are they going to go through this time where, I mean, we're talking about students in Guatemala who have now been out of school for an entire 2 years.
Right.
So we're saying students like that are continuing to matriculate. So if you had a first grader or you were in the first grade, or you have a first grader in March of 2020, they're gonna be walking back into the classroom a third grader.
Right.
Meaning they missed all of that. And we wanna now be preparing those students, families, teachers for what's gonna happen next, what happens at reentry. And something that I've been so lucky to learn from and follow Freeman's leadership in is, and his fellow country directors, is the importance of, it sounds sort of simple, but the importance of just really showing up in that moment.
Yeah.
Not being the folks, when you walk back into the school for the first time, we're not gonna be like, all right, so you need to take a literacy test because we need to, figure out what your learning loss is.
Right.
First and foremost, we need to be, hi, how are you? I'm not okay. Are you not okay? Because we're not okay right now. Yeah. And how can we talk about and deal with that? And that's where, as you mentioned, social emotional learning and just those resources comes into play, and making sure that we are showing up for entire people, for your whole self, all those things that means. So as we're getting ready for reentry in the case of Guatemala, or as we are fully back in Ghana and Laos, not losing sight of that, really focusing on making sure that we are giving particularly teachers and students the resources to focus on health and well-being, and making sure that that is cared for and nurtured and continued. And yes, there's a learning loss, and yes, we will work through that, and it's going to be very complicated. But first, we just want to make sure that we're showing up.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think that the challenges that we see in our communities as it relates to COVID is not dissimilar to the challenges we see all over the world. I read somewhere that economists are saying that this could be the lost generation because of their learning losses, because of the trauma that our students are facing re-entering the classroom after having that time missing. It is the same type of disparity and disparate outcomes that we see all around the world. We see students who have experienced different things when they have been home. In our communities, our students associate being in classroom with learning. They associate being in community with learning. It's challenging to then transition that and to shut the school walls down, or shut the school doors down. It becomes difficult and sad and traumatic, and our students really desperately want to be in community with one another together. It impacts our teachers and their ability to go back to those rural environments and reteach and pick up things where they left off. A lot of our students lose family members to COVID or experience sickness and are traumatized in that way. And as Leslie said, there is that learning gap of students who will simply matriculate based on their age, not based on their competency, and our teachers will be pressured to ensure that those students check those boxes and deliver those things, and not be given the additional competencies or space that is required to now differentiate learning for students that have a different experience at home, students who don't have that access to broadband or to all of the things that we talk about, students who now don't have the access to clean water or school lunches, all of those things, all of the things that we experience all around the world. And so for POP, really paying attention to reentry. As Leslie said, there are students who have not been back in classrooms since the beginning of the pandemic who are now reentering classrooms, and really defining what that looks like and defining what support looks like for our teachers, really helping parents who are now called to or have been called to support their students, parents who are illiterate because of their communities and the way that they have grown up without the safe, sound infrastructure that POP works so diligently with communities to support. And so thinking in a different way how we support parents in order to now show up for their children in a different way. These are some of the challenges that we see and some of the commitment that we have to continuing to support our communities as we continue to grow. And as Leslie said, we're very proud that while students were not in school, we were still in classroom. We were making them better. If you were in the room and you happened to see the trailer, you saw us building a pathway to make it easier for students to re-enter a school building when that time comes. I'm very proud that Pencils of Promise has not shut down our services because our staff members are national. And we were able to continue to be there for our students and our families and our communities. So now I'd love to, after a long wait, I'd love to engage Freeman, my peer who is based in Ghana, who is in Ghana right now, who is generously joining us. Thank you so much, Freeman. So first, I wanted to begin with asking you, what are some of the educational challenges in Ghana that Ghana and the Ghanaian government are hoping to address for their students?
Thank you, Kailee. It's a great opportunity to join you in talking about the work we've been doing in Ghana. It's been exciting for the past 10 years that I joined this organization. From a health background, community engagement background, somebody who has worked with people living with HIV, health management issues. But over the past 10 years, having joined this incredible organization and transitioning from health to education, you are exposed to the realities that our people face in terms of having access to quality education. The country Ghana, we've made strides, I think, over the past 2 decades in terms of improving access of quality education, bridging the gap between boys and girls in primary school. So that may not be an issue for us now. But as we talk about these achievements, there are huge gaps and challenges that still exist in the system. In the area of infrastructure, you have situations where you move to communities where the children are still studying under trees. Yes, I have been lucky. I've not seen, where I grew up, I've not seen people studying under trees or sitting on wood planks or stones or even on the floor to be able to have access to these basic human rights. So having been exposed to this in most of the communities, I must admit that I've visited more than 300 communities in the communities that we work, that you stay in the stark reality of a situation where these children just want to have access to education, but they need to have to sit on a floor, sit on hard stones to be able to acquire this. The other reality or the gap that we've been seeing that has been widely documented in government's strategic plan, especially the one that was run from 2018 to 2030, where there are currently about 7,000 schools that are still under trees or needing repairs, or that may need toilet facilities to be able to improve on sanitation and hygiene in the school. So it ranges from lack of classroom infrastructure, sanitation facilities in terms of toilets. You're also talking about teachers. Sometimes you move to some of these schools that we work in where you may have one teacher or two that is taking care of about 100 learners. And then you have the same person is the head teacher or the principal. Would have to teach the whole day. There are also issues of relevant teaching and learning materials that kind of elude a lot of our children. I have seen situations where there's only one textbook in a whole school. Mm-hmm. So the teacher will need to find time, recopy all this on a chalkboard, and then the kids will have to copy. You bear with me that by the time you finish copying all this, the time is over. And you only need to copy this and go home and go and read. So these are realities that you are exposed to as somebody who is leading an organization of young people who are willing to support their kinsmen to be able to acquire basic education. So basically, these are some of the challenges that we have seen. Resources from government these days kind of dwindling. Maybe this could be ascribed to different factors. of the economic breakdown that's happening, maybe due to COVID, Russia, and all that. So you have principals who need to run a school of 500 children,
Yeah.
but do not have a budget to run with. That even makes it very difficult to. So these are kind of myriad of challenges and gaps that government itself and the stakeholders we work with kind of have documented, and we have seen it on the ground over the past 10 years that we've been working in Ghana.
Yeah, that's you've highlighted quite a few things and quite a few of the issues that we address in Ghana. You mentioned something about resources. You mentioned that oftentimes there are not that many resources in a classroom, and a teacher is literally writing everything on the board, and a student has to copy all of that. How has technology, if technology has played a role, I want to talk a bit about how technology has helped overcome some of those challenges, and how you in Ghana and our country office in Ghana has addressed some of those challenges through technology.
Yes, I think we all know that these days, without technology, you can hardly do anything. But these communities, most of them do not even have access to 2G, or even talking about 3G and 4Gs, and even you talk about the 5Gs. So they need to deal with situations like this. We have tried on a number of occasions to send internet to some of these communities where kids can use tablets and all that to read, but we've not been successful because of the infrastructure in most of these communities. And so what we quickly learned or have done is to look at an offline system where we have partnered with World Reader and able to bring Kindles that we have carefully selected, plus age-appropriate textbooks and storybooks that are preloaded on some of these Kindles that we have deployed in these classrooms. So if you have a child who hitherto was studying under a mango tree, which we have seen, and now in a classroom, a safe classroom, roofed with windows, doors closed, and then all of a sudden, child have 100 books in his or her palm to be able to read. I think most of the time it's just exciting. And if you go to those communities, there's nothing that you can do that to just feel fulfilled as somebody who is just giving back to your own people. Yeah. So that is how.
Oops. I'm sure he'll be back in a moment.
Yeah.
But
also promise app that.
Yeah, it was a little glitch, Freeman. But if you can.
Okay. Yeah. So we have developed an app that you can download and also read from, which we are currently piloting. We are sure that by next year we'll be rolling this app vigorously in the schools that we work. So in terms of technology, yes, there are infrastructure challenges, but we have learned over the period, and we have developed solutions that we can use offline to be able to reach a lot of the communities that we work in.
Yeah, the Kindle, I understand the Kindle and the e-reader in particular has been transformative in the classroom, as you said, to be able to provide hundreds of books to students just in the palm of their hand. And it's not something that we rely upon all the G's, which I don't know, in order to access. And the app that you talked about is very exciting that we're piloting in Ghana this year, a bespoke app that will allow us to download very specific textbooks, culturally relevant books that are written by local authors, so that our students, and Leslie, you can speak a little bit more about that. It's really exciting part of how technology has been able to enhance the resources that we need in our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing all of that, Freeman. And I would say on top of that, kind of to your point, like we think of technology as a vehicle, right? Technology, for at least for Pencils of Promise, is not where you're going. Technology is how you're getting there. Right. So at no point in time where you're going to be like, let's bring technology. We're saying, let's bring books. Okay, here's the best way to do that.
Right.
And it has been the Kindle so far for us. And now with this app that we're rolling out, we've spent a ton of time, and primarily Freeman's team and his colleagues spent so much time deeply vetting what goes on this app, because we're also talking about quality. We're going back to kind of a theme of Pencils of Promise. We're talking about the quality of what happens. We're not just going to give you an app and be like, okay, download any book ever. We're going to say, here's books that are targeted to your level, your language, like all of these types of things that really matter, that are going to really move the needle. And so we're super excited, as Freeman said, to watch this really start to roll out and take off with, again, keeping in mind all offline capabilities, because technology is not the end that we're reaching towards, right? Just the access to the books is what we're headed towards. So offline capabilities for students to download, get access to books that are local to them, in your first language, all of these types of things. We're really excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, we're excited. Freeman, we talked a bit about our menstrual health programming here during Women's History Month, where we further acknowledge how important it is to focus on our women and girls. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that programming in Ghana. It's incredibly impactful. If, again, you watch the film I Promise You, you'll see our students in Ghana who joined together to create sustainable menstrual products for women, girls and boys. So Freeman, please talk a bit, before I keep talking, please tell us a little bit about the menstrual health program in Ghana.
Yeah, the menstrual hygiene program is part of our WASH program, where we are teaching kids how to wash their hands, brush their teeth, toilet hygiene and all that. Then we also realized along the way that the whole issue of menstrual hygiene is kind of a taboo in some communities. It's very topical. Parents are not talking about it. Some teachers are not talking about it. So we went in, developed a whole program around it to be able to educate students, parents, teachers, to advocate for a safe space for our young sisters so that they can remain in school. Something that struck me one day, that we went to a community, and entering the community, we've seen some thatched houses on the way. After inquiring for some time, we were told that in that community, if you start menstruating, you don't stay in the community. You need to move out and stay in that house provided for 5 days before coming back. So you look at a situation like this where a young girl will have to miss school for 4 or 5 days, staying out because of this natural phenomenon. What did we do? We've started engaging community leaders, using some of the government structures that are available, talking to girl child education officers. And some of these practices are kind of quite entrenched. They've been there for years, but it has to take somebody to speak about them. We are not expecting that some of these practices will go away within a few days. We have also started, because most of these girls cannot also, or their parents can also afford the sanitary pads that we know, the disposable ones. So we kind of started teaching them reusable ones. They are sewing it themselves in the schools, and then also teaching parents to be able to kind of show them how this is done. We have not left the boys out. We think that we need to bring the boys along. We've realized situations where girls even said that the boys laugh at them during the menstruation period. So one of the things is not to leave the boys out, to bring them in. And this particular program is catching up a lot. There are a lot of interest from other stakeholders to come on board. And we are very sure that with advocacy, providing some resources and providing the materials for them to be able to sew, that will go a long way to be able to remove this barrier or biases that our young girls face in school. So this is also an exciting thing that we think that we need to remove this barrier even when you're talking about science or literacy or mathematics, this barrier needs to be removed for our young girls to be in school before you can even talk about mathematics or science or literacy. So this is another exciting thing that is actually catching up with our students and teachers and also community members in Ghana.
Yeah, and I think that you pull up a lot of very important notes there, specifically when we talk about education, and that education often requires advocacy for our students in order to allow to remove the barriers for them to thrive and fully realize their potential as students. And advocacy is a big part of education, and we see that particularly, as you were saying, in menstrual health for women and girls, because of the deep biases, in particular in Ghana and many other areas of the world, where women are made to feel as if they have to move away or be in a different environment or a different location, or they can't enter a classroom when something as natural as their period happens. And it takes deep emphasis in ensuring that the community's minds change. As I've heard you say, Freeman, that this is a deeply ingrained mentality in many of the communities where POP lends support, that many of the leaders feel this way very strongly about it, and this advocacy for our women and girls to ensure that those pathways are cleared for them is another layer, as we all know, to education that we see here, in particular around our menstrual health programming. The other thing that you mentioned, which is very, very important to note, is this feeling I often note and notice about this commodities-driven intervention. Like, you know, if we send materials, if we send people things from all around to other places all around the world, if we can just send what we have, old books, you know, menstrual health materials, all of these things, will solve a lot of problems. And I've heard you say, Leslie, that there are people in our communities that have like excess amounts of commodities that they've been sent and cannot use, because this is, again, this issue in development where we don't think of empowerment. We think of how can we Band-Aid, how can we send, how can we provide? And that is not our role. Our role is to empower people. Our role is to ensure that people have sustainable solutions developed by themselves, created by themselves, sustained by themselves. And so in this case, in our menstrual health programming, what Freeman was describing is this incredible program where we, in fact, teach boys and girls, something that is foreign to me even in this country, that we teach, because that's not the way I learned. No boys were in the environment when I learned about the way my body worked. But we teach boys and girls to create sustainable materials so that girls feel empowered and they are proud. And the materials that they create are beautiful and reusable, so that commodities that we may send, Freeman mentioned that there's a difficulty to afford things, but there's also a difficulty with in sanitation and making sure all of the disposal products go somewhere. We don't have to worry about that by addressing the need in the way that the need needs to be filled. And so I'm proud of many of those things. So, Freeman, I also wanted to hear from you specifically, and I'm sure the group does as well, about how the pandemic has impacted the programming in Ghana.
Yeah, in actual fact, I think that, as Leslie said, this pandemic has affected everybody across the board. What we have done, or what I'm excited about, I think Leslie mentioned that our colleagues in Guatemala are still not in school since 2020. But I'm excited and happy that Ghanaian children are back in school since 2021. Yes, we had challenges, but the pandemic was managed well. Students returned to school from the tertiary level, we learned through that. To secondary, we learned through that. To then to the primary. I must admit there were a few cases, but I think that was managed well. So we are happy that we are back in our communities with schools at all levels in session. That has reduced the social and psychological impact on our learners, parents, and teachers. We have also realized that going back to some of the communities that we've worked in, that enrollments have reduced. We're asking ourselves why. Then find out that some parents will have to migrate from their original homes to some city centers to be able to make some money or get income to be able to take care of the family, because most of them lost income. So the reduction in enrollment in some schools leading to overcrowding in some other schools. So we have seen that also. We talked about resources where schools resumed all right, but reading resources all over affected government also. So we've been to school where feeding of children sometimes is compromised. Materials that need to be in the school before teaching and learning can go on well are not there. Yes, we're there to support a bit some of the schools. Kids who have, yes, government provided masks, hand sanitizers to kids who go back to school, but some of this got exhausted along the way. So it has been a huge impact, particularly on education. Some radio programs were run through the system, but what we realized is that there are some communities that would not even have radio link going in there. So what we did is to deploy some of our team members, observing all the protocols that were outlined by government. We need to even gather kids in smaller groups to read to them. Most of them left their books in the classroom when schools were closed. So people went home without a single book. So I must admit that it's been a huge impact negatively on us as staff working for Pencils of Promise and also the communities that we work in. But over time, thank God in our office, nobody had COVID. We are not special people, but I think that we adhere to the protocols as we go to these communities or travel around. As Leslie said, we don't want to wait when COVID is over, then we start showing up in this community. I'm sure they will not even welcome us. So we try to be there through these difficult periods and to support them. So that has been the impact and how we're able to, in a small way, contribute to lessening the devastating effects of the pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Again, we're all facing, every school, every student, every teacher all over the world is facing the impact of COVID, and really understanding how the impact of COVID will change the landscape of education. And I hope that we will learn from one another, because if we've been taught nothing else, COVID has taught us that we must function as a collective in order to survive and to thrive. So I wanted to just talk and then share with that, and ask my colleagues to share, and then we'll answer a few questions about what the future holds for Pencils of Promise. I believe that the next 3 years will be transformative for Pencils of Promise. I believe that due in no small part to how we see the pandemic joining us as a unified community, global community of global citizens that care for one another, that will learn lessons from one another, and that we will start to develop additional advocates for not just domestic education, but for global education, which impacts the most marginalized among us the most. And so, as I said earlier, first and foremost, we will focus on reintegration, what that looks like, learning lessons, as Freeman shared some of the innovations that we've been able to implement based on the pivot that we've had to make towards still serving our communities and our families, even when they weren't in classroom. And some of those things are helpful. Some of those things we should continue. And so really having an emphasis and a focus on reintegration, we're focusing on our teachers and ensuring that they feel empowered, focusing focusing on our families and our parents, and focusing on our students and what they need. So really looking to see what back to school looks like now and addressing all of the unique challenges that we face post-COVID will be, or not really post-COVID, but as we deal with the impact of COVID will be foremost for us. We are looking at scale and how we can significantly increase our impact to extend to our children, our families, our students, and our full communities, and what impact looks like, and how we can ensure that people everywhere are able to access knowledge and access primary education in the most high quality of ways. And we'll continue to tell our story. We'll continue to make sure that people understand that education isn't just building. While we are very proud to have built schools all over this world, we understand that schools are not just four walls, it's not just infrastructure, but it includes all of the resources that are inside of those schools to ensure their students are fulfilled and that they feel that they can achieve all of their dreams. Leslie and Freeman, did you have anything to add about the future as you see it?
Yeah, I would say that particularly coming out of, I guess like you said, not COVID ending, coming out of this period of COVID, continuing to be really open to what is happening in the world around us. And that's something that I think has always really set Pencils of Promise apart, is that we're not stuck in this very common cycle and development of, we have a 5-year grant to do this thing. 3 years in, we don't think it's really working, but it's a 5-year grant, so we should keep doing it. We're able to say, you know what, communities, students, teachers need something different. We're going to pivot, we're going to change, and we're going to listen. And Freeman, I'd love to hear really how you see that kind of playing out, because I know you and I have spent a lot of time, you and Kailee and I and your fellow country directors, talking about that openness and that willingness to kind of work in a changing environment and what that looks like, and how you see that playing out in Ghana.
Yeah, I think that the next step, or years beyond this years, looks bright for us. We have learned a lot of lessons, even through a difficult pandemic. And for me and other country directors, we want to be present and continue to support students, teachers, and communities that we work in. I think that the communities are ready to work with us. They love us. As Leslie said, we are not stuck in this whole thing of we have ended, it's 5 years, we are done. We want to be there for the long haul and support these communities, support teachers with innovative ways of teaching and bringing the students to that standard that we all need for them to succeed and become good resources to our countries that we work in. Continue to support our young girls, today being the National Women's Day. For me, with 3 girls, I don't want any girl to be left behind in the quest to acquire education, which for me is enshrined in most countries' constitution. I can speak to that of Ghana, Article 25 of our constitution, talk about education as a basic human right. So if it's a basic human right, it shouldn't just be boys alone, it shouldn't just be girls alone, it should just bring all of them along.
Yeah.
And so my slogan going forward is not to leave any girl behind. The biases should not prevent them from acquiring these basic human rights. Be it menstrual hygiene, be it a toilet, be it a urinal, we need to be there to support these young ones. Yes. To be able to get to a point that we also are now. And we are very sure that with these basic resources that we provide, it will be able to help them to succeed in life and become valuable citizens to our countries.
Yes, thank you. And I know we have only a few minutes left, and we have some really good questions. And I will answer one of them very briefly, because I see that it's been upvoted a lot, and it's around why we work in Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos. And we get asked that question a lot. And to that, I'll say it's very important for us to be in areas where our country governments are very cooperative and really want the best educational outcome for its citizens. And where we are in Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos, We do have very good relationships with country governments. This is important in development work, as I found working in development for decades. It's very important to not have those barriers to dealing with a government that may be oppositional to the work that you do. So we're able to quickly do needs assessments, quickly work with those governments to be able to address the specific goals of those communities. And we will continue to reach out to similar regions as we grow and scale. So I wanted to answer that question. Another really great question that I see here, Freeman, and you touched on this, is about community involvement and community engagement. And I've heard you speak so eloquently about how communities are engaged. And so folks were interested in understanding how we engage with parents and families in order to gain community support and broaden our efforts to education around things like hygiene practices. We have like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think that we are set up to not like other organizations who are like charities. We provide a school and we are done. What we have learned from day one is to bring along our communities that we work in. So we have a very elaborate community engagement, parents' participation, and community involvement processes within the organization using staff that we have. So especially for, let's say, infrastructure program, our communities are engaged from day one. We scout the school. We tell the communities what we need to do. The communities contribute 20% of the cost to the project through basic community contribution like sand, shippings, and labor. They show up. That volunteer spirit that we want to rekindle. So if you're building a typical school for 3, 5, 6 months, you have parents that show up to support in building that school. Now, so if that is completed, it is not a pencils of promise school. It becomes a collaboration or a partnership between pencils of promise and the community. Along the way, even when you are even distributing or deploying electronic readers, parents are present.
Yes.
They want to sign against their children's name that they have received these items. If kids are sewing reusable parts, you have some parents showing up.
Yes.
If we are deploying hand washing stations, parents want to come and observe what we are doing. So you feel fulfilled when you have a parent who say, my child came home and was teaching us how to wash our hands. So, meaning that the children are learning something and sending it home.
Yes.
So this is to the extent to which we are able to engage parents, community leaders, going through the structures that has already existed in these communities. We don't go on our own. If we need to talk to government officials, we do that. If we need to talk to chiefs at the lowest level, we have to do that.
Yes.
So sometimes this can take a very long time before a project is implemented. But if we get it right, that project will definitely succeed.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're just about out of time. Thank you again to everyone who's watching and who's observing. And thank you for your commitment to our global community. And I hope that you are inspired to continue to think about education from a global perspective and the importance of education being a human right. I encourage you to visit us at pencilsofpromise.org to find out how you can become more involved and engaged, build schools with us, participate with us, learn more about the work that we do, and bring some of the curriculum to your classrooms and vice versa. So thank you very much. Thank you to South by Southwest EDU for having us here for this very important conversation.